Hi, everybody. I would like first to thank the scientific committee and the organizing committee of the International Conference on Water Resources in Arid Environment for inviting me to present today one of the very important issues in our region, in the Arab region and the Middle East region, which is the reuse of treated wastewater. Reuse of treated wastewater is considered as one of the very important issue at present due to the lack of the renewable surface water resources and also the use of expensive desalinated water. Globally, treated wastewater is reused for either agriculture or industrial or landscaping. Agriculture is reusing about 36% out of the total collected and treated wastewater globally. The industrial sector is used about 21%, and the landscape irrigation is using about 22%. Also, it has been used for recharge of the groundwater aquifer due to the deterioration and the over abstraction in the groundwater aquifer. However, it's only about 2% at present used for recharging the aquifer system, but it is also a potential field for reusing treated wastewater in our region. In our region, we don't have enough surface water bodies, and unfortunately, most of the surface water, about 70% of the surface water is coming from outside our region, and the precipitation and the rainfall is very limited, and it's not enough for agriculture and food production. So we have to use non-traditional water resources, which is mainly either treated wastewater or desalinated water. At present, the per capita freshwater resources availability in our region was in 1960 is 3,400 cubic meter per year per capita. At present, it has been declined to only 400 cubic meter per capita per year, which is very far below the poverty water line, which is 1,000 cubic meter a year. This means that we are suffering and we are experiencing a very severe challenge to produce our food and to also to save enough fresh water to cover the demand in our region. And this means that we have to find alternative resources to cover the gap between the existing and the future demand and the present and existing available renewable freshwater resources in our region. Also, because of the limited freshwater resource and the scarcity of water resources in our region, it have been affected the self-sufficient ratio from our food. In our region, about most of our countries, and especially in the GCC countries and some countries, the self-sufficient ratio is sometimes less than 20%, which means that 80% of our food is imported from our neighboring countries, and it's been affected by either the social stability or the political stability, and the price is increasing, which means that we have to invest more and more every year for importing our foods from neighboring countries or from outside the region. This is showing some of the cereals and sugar and fat exports and the jump from 2005 in 2011. And now even in 2020, it has been doubled. So it means that every year, our need for food will increase, and the limited fresh water is not enabling us to produce our food. And this means that all this is pressuring us or enforcing us to find another alternative solution and new innovative technology in agriculture to improve the self-sufficient ratio and to cover the gap in water resources. The cost of food imports at present is about $75 billion a year in our region, and this will increase by 2030 to be 95. In 2040, it will be 125, and by 2050 it will be jumped to $150 billion a year, which means that there is a lot of pressure on the economic, especially in the countries which are not able to find these financial resources, especially by dollars or whatever, to cover or to fill the gap between the demand, food demand, and the food availability in our region. And always we will continue depending on the food imported from our neighboring countries, and which will be affected by the political instability and the social instability in this region. Why we have to find another alternative solution to fill this gap. Recently, there is a lot of efforts to reuse the treated wastewater. Treated wastewater is considered as one of the renewable resources because it's continuously coming. It will always continuously, especially with the population increase, the rules will be also always generated treated wastewater that will come as a very important resources, and we have to treat it and reuse it. And at present, about 12 billion cubic meter a year it's collected and produced. Out of them, 6 billion only is treated and 4 billion is reused. However, there is a gap now in between the 4 billion reused and the 12 billion produced and treated. So we have about 8 billion cubic meter of treated wastewater which is not reused or utilized at present. At present, this means that we have about 6 billion untreated and 8 billion unused. We have to increase the or to invest a little bit more in the treatment plants and the treatment facilities, and also we have to investment in the building of the infrastructure to collect and utilize the treated wastewater or untreated wastewater in different issues. The increasing in the production of the treated wastewater will continue because the population is increased and the domestic water is increasing. So we have to collect this water and treat it, otherwise it will create a lot of environmental problems. And treatment and reuse it will help also to suffer, to fill the gap between the demand, the increasing demand in water sector and the availability of the freshwater resources. The option for reusing treated wastewater in our region, there is many options. The first option and the very important issue is the agriculture and the food production to fill the gap between or to improve the self-sufficient ratio of the food and improve the food security situation in our region. And this is a very important issue. Irrigation is using about 80% out of the total water use in our region. So when we start, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, there is no enough surface water bodies, there is no rainfall, there is no the aquifer in the aquifer within the groundwater aquifer was deteriorated and over abstracted, and the limited renewable resources to this aquifer lead to due to the over abstraction lead to the deterioration of the groundwater quality and the dramatic drop in the water table, which means that it is not sustainable at present to continue depending on the groundwater. And as we don't have enough surface water, so we have to find another alternative solution, which is mainly the conventional water resources, including treated wastewater. So treated wastewater is considering a very important factor or a very important resource that can enhance the food production and also help us into the agriculture sector. At present, in some countries, there is a lot of, or neighboring countries, it has been used successfully, and even in our region, and I will give some successful story from our region. Also for landscaping, for amenity plantation, for root verges, is a very important resource for the environmental and recreational use, because in some areas now, about between 12 to 40% of our water resources is used for environmental and recreational use. And in some region, like GCC region, the desalinated water is used for recreational and for landscaping, for national parks and gardens. If we can replace it with treated wastewater, it will solve the problem, and it will reduce the cost and energy consumption in very important sector like desalination sector. Also, it is used for the industrial sector, and it is not mandatory to use it in the industrial process itself, but in the outside of the industrial process, like for stabilization of roads, for landscaping, for cooling, for many purposes in the industrial sector. Treated wastewater can be used efficiently and very successfully. Also, one of the very important promising sector is the district cooling, especially in GCC region. The district cooling is using a lot of water for cooling the residential areas within our region. And mostly this water is coming at present from the desalinated water, which is very costly and intensive energy use. So if we replace it with treated wastewater, this will help us to elevate or to enhance the situation, and also it will have an economic factor. However, there is some challenging due to the algae growth inside the pipelines and the network of the cooling district cooling system. But there is many solutions to overcome this issue and to improve it in the future. Also, one of the very important issue is the aquifer recharge, groundwater aquifer recharge. As I mentioned, globally, only 2% of treated wastewater is used at present for recharging the aquifer system. However, in our region, especially in our arid region, where the direct use is costly or there is some challenging regarding the quality, groundwater recharge with treated water is a very promising and very important solution to enhance the quality and treat the quality to improve the situation of the deteriorated groundwater aquifer system and refresh the aquifer system. And also it have some economic issue regard to it will reduce the cost for transportation and transferring the water from which is produced to the nearest demand center by recharging the aquifer and leading it to refresh the aquifer system. So later on, the aquifer water blended with the treated wastewater can be utilized for agriculture after this treatment and after improvement. However, it has some health risk issues and the potential environmental impact, but with the good design and the regulation and the monitoring of the recharge system, we can overcome these challenges and we can improve the situation. The wastewater used for food production also have some challenges, and we have to have a very careful during the design of the irrigation system, during the selection of the crops, which will be irrigated according or to be incompatible with the the quality of the produced treated wastewater within the region. Most of this composition, which you should be taking care about it and monitor very carefully, is the organic matter, the nutrients, the non-organic matters, and the toxic and the trace chemicals existing, and also the pathogens and bacteria and total coliform and other pathogenic existing. And also we have to study carefully the quality and the quantity produced and the used treatment technology in this area to be able to select the crops and the irrigation technology which should be used for agriculture. Selection of the irrigation method is very, very important because it depends on the quality also of the treated wastewater and also on the economic of the using or the economic issue of using treated wastewater. Under normal conditions, the following factors should be considered very carefully: the water supply conditions, the climate conditions, the soil characteristics, the cost of the irrigation methods, and also the type of crops which will be cultivated within the region by this quality, and the system operational and management, and also the monitoring of the system and the regulation of the system. Other factors that should be also considered for the irrigation is the wastewater quality, the health risk especially for the farmers or the laborers working in the farms, the protection of the soil and the groundwater from the pollution and the soil salinity and these things, the salinity and the toxicity of the hazards. It's very important. The operational and maintenance cost for the system and its effect on the price of the produced foods within this area. It's very important to be considered consider during the design and the planning for reusing of the treated wastewater, and also the water application. All these factors should be studied and assessed very carefully before we go to the reuse and treated wastewater. There is many successful stories within our region, and we should assess this successful story, learn from this successful story, and see what is the lesson learned, and could be implemented in some other areas or in some other countries, and after assessing the special assessment of this one. I will mention here in this presentation 4 cases. The first one is the Jordan. Jordan have a very big deficit in the renewable water resources annually, and unfortunately, it is have a water poverty, which is very far below the global water poverty line, which is 1,000. And nowadays, per capita in water in Jordan is less than 180 cubic meter per capita per year, which means that there is a big challenge. Jordan started now to reuse the treated wastewater in many regions, and at present it uses about 500 million cubic meter of this treated wastewater in the country, and it uses it under very good regulation and restriction that allow the Jordan to overcome the situation of the deficit between the water supply and water demand, as most of this water is used for agriculture production. And also there is some gray water is used in the backyards in 10,000 households, which also is a very good experience that we have to assess it and study it and see what is the lesson learned from this experience. Meanwhile, also in Kuwait, there is a lot of reuse of treated wastewater at present. The facilities exist and the treatment capacity is over than 255 million cubic meter a year. Recently, there is the annual quantity produced of the treated wastewater is between 564 and 696 million cubic meter a year. This is a new facility was constructed in Solobia to produce additional 375,000 meter cube a day. This will be also over advanced treatment in Solobia will allow to reuse this treated wastewater at present using the ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis, which is very high quality and very important and very good quality that can be reused for agriculture production and to enhance the water situation. So the Kuwait experience also in Solibia is very important lesson learned that we have to learn from it. Meanwhile, we have also in Egypt recently, there is a lot of efforts to reuse the treated wastewater either from agriculture drainage or the wastewater treatment. There is 3 big treatment facilities have been constructed recently. One of them, which and I give as an example here in this presentation, is the Bahr al-Bakar agriculture and wastewater treatment plant. The design capacity is 5.6 million cubic meter a day. This will serve an area of about 650,000 cubic meter, which is about 150 faddan. This is the area of the facility itself. However, it will reclaim the water, which is enough to supply the water for 400,000 faddan. Faddan is an Egyptian unit area equal to 4,200 square meter or have 1 acre. It's about mostly 1 acre. The facility is also is used for producing the biosolids with a capacity of 490,000 tons with a dryness of about 24%. This is very important effort to improve the agriculture production in Egypt, along with other 3 facilities under construction now. And to enhance also and recycle the agriculture drainage water and the wastewater, and to treat these quantities of this water which was discharged to environment before. The same in United Arab Emirates. Recently, the government spent about 1.2 billion Emirati dirham to use or to build two big mega pipelines to transfer the water from Abu Dhabi Island to the nearest demand center along the Dubai Road and Al Ain Road. These facilities will allow the United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi Emirate to use about 390,000 cubic meter a day for irrigating about 4,200 farms to replace the use of desalinated water in 2080 farms, and to replace the use of groundwater in 2,200 farms. This will alleviate also, this will have a very good economic return back, and the return back and the visibility study was assessing, was done, and it indicates that the return period from, or the return value from the reusing of treated wastewater to replace the desalinated water is only 1 year to cover the cost, the capital cost and the operational cost, and it will be about 2.5 years to cover the cost for using to replace the groundwater use, and also it will alleviate the pressure on the deteriorating groundwater. The groundwater used at present in this area, it is with the salinity of ranges between 10,000 ppm to 15,000 ppm. Which means that it is non-productive anymore, and it have no economic value or technical value to produce the foods from this area anymore. So replacing it will enhance the situation and will improve the investment on the agriculture in this 2,200 farms, replacing the groundwater in Al Ain Road. All this experience, it is very important to learn from them and to improve our situation in future. One of the very important constraints that should be taken into consideration is the the cost of the reusing of treated wastewater, especially for the construction of the infrastructure needed to transfer the water from where it's produced and treated to the nearest demand centers, and also the wastewater regulation. Unfortunately, most of the countries in Arab regions, they don't have enough regulation either for treatment or for use. Mostly for treatment, yes. Some countries, they do have good regulation for treatment, but for reuse, some of the countries, they don't have regulation for reuse or the monitoring of the reuse of treated wastewater. Also, the risk assessment regulation does not exist, or the plans for the risk assessment. And for monitoring also, most of the countries, they don't have enough monitoring tools or system to monitor the reuse of treated wastewater. Also, the institutional fragmentation. Unfortunately, in some countries in our region, we do have, and we have experienced some institutional and even legal fragmentation. This should be solved to overcome the situation and to fill this gap. The private sector participation, there is no enough private sector participation, and most of the treatment plants, construction, the production, and even the transmission of the treated wastewater to the end users is done by the government. More efforts is needed to improve the private sector participation in this sector in the future. The socio-culture is also one of the very important factor affecting the reuse of treated wastewater and the accessibility of the end users. It's very important to work and to have some enough awareness campaigns and education campaigns to improve the socio-culture and the public participation and the acceptance of using treated wastewater in agriculture to avoid the resistance of the end users in the future. With this, I can say that the treated wastewater can play an important role to secure the freshwater sector, and also to enhance and to fill the gaps between the supply, the supply and the growing demand, and especially also for food demand. We have to focus in the future in the comprehensive approach for wastewater reuse, and it should be developed from collection, treatment to land and crop selection, on-farm practice. This approach needs to build on the basis of the stakeholders stakeholder engagement in all aspects, from the beginning of the cycle to the end of the cycle. The existing regulatory framework, including standards, guidelines, need to be revised and updated. The need flexible, clear, and built on a risk assessment and management approach. This should be also very carefully assessed in our region. Extensive capacity building, training of related staff for supporting the appropriate and safe treatment, wastewater and reuse. It is needed, and there is an imminent need to build and experiences and specialized experts and extension staff that could work with the end users to learn them how they can use it, how they can select their irrigation system, how they can design it, how they can protect themselves, how they can overcome the risk, the health risk assessment. Stakeholder engagements and the private sector participation is very important part of this cycle, and it should be needed. Hence, more studies and research are also needed on the socio-economic environmental impacts of the reuse of treated wastewater in region. With this, I would like to thank you all, and thanks our colleagues in the ICRI. Thank you very much.